Welcome to Le Podcast de Philip. We're diving into a pretty critical situation today. We're going to be looking at potential market manipulation connected to some of Donald Trump's tariff decisions.
Right.
Specifically from April 9th, 2025. We're going to be examining his public statements, the timeline of the tariff announcements, looking at some pretty unusual trading activity that happened in exchange-traded funds, things like QQQ and SPY.
Yes.
And we'll also be going over some of the calls for investigation that came out after this from some prominent Democratic senators and Congress members.
Yeah.
But before we get started, I'd like to ask all of you listening on YouTube to help us reach 1,000 subscribers today.
That would be fantastic.
All right, so to set the stage here, on the morning of April 9th, 2025, Donald Trump, he made a series of posts on Truth Social. First, he said, "Be cool. Everything is going to work out well. The USA will be bigger and better than ever before."
Right.
And then he followed that up with, "This is a great time to buy. DJT." Now, when someone with his level of public influence comes out and basically encourages people to buy stock, it obviously raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, especially with the timing of this.
Exactly.
Especially right before, some pretty significant policy shifts.
Right. And this is something that's directly addressed under U.S. securities law, right? This idea of market manipulation.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the core principles of our securities laws is to prevent people from artificially inflating or deflating the market through manipulation.
Right. I mean, we have all these rules against insider trading. You can't just go out and use non-public information to unfairly profit in the stock market.
Exactly.
And this situation, I mean, it really seems to touch on some similar concerns.
It really does, yeah. I mean, you have a very powerful figure, and it seems like they're potentially using their influence to, sway the market.
Right. And to add to this, all of this is happening after we've had months of the Trump administration, really taking a hard line on tariffs. We have people like Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, Jamieson Greer, the Trade Representative. They've all been saying that these globally imposed tariffs are here to stay.
Yeah, it was a pretty consistent message.
Yeah, and Greer, I mean, he was testifying before Congress just a few days before this all went down, and he was still saying that the tariffs would never be paused.
So to see this sudden shift, it's pretty jarring.
It is.
I mean, the market was basically operating under the assumption that these tariffs were going to remain in effect. So when things changed so suddenly, it's no wonder we saw such a dramatic reaction.
Well, and that leads us to what happened later that same day.
Right.
So around noon on April 9th, Trump announces that he's actually increasing tariffs on China.
Wow.
By a lot. We're talking 125%.
125%.
But at the same time, he announces a pause on tariffs for all other countries.
Okay.
And, well, what happens next is pretty interesting. Right after this announcement, the stock market, which had been on a downward trend, it suddenly shoots up.
Interesting.
I mean, I know market volatility is normal,
Right.
but this timing seems a little too perfect.
Yeah, you have to wonder if the two aren't connected.
Exactly.
I mean, market corrections are one thing, but this kind of immediate and drastic surge happening right on the heels of that news.
It seems like more than a coincidence.
It does, yeah. It really makes you question whether some people might have seen this coming.
And that brings us to some pretty strange activity that was happening in the exchange-traded fund market.
ETFs, right.
Yeah, things like QQQ, which tracks the NASDAQ,
Right.
and SPY, which tracks the S&P 500.
Okay, so what were we seeing with those?
Well, an account called Unusual Whales, they pointed out some really unusual opening volume in call options for these ETFs.
Right before Trump's Truth Social posts.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about QQQ, TQQQ, and SPY, a lot of activity there.
So for those who might not know, call options, they're basically bets that an asset's price is going to go up. And when you see this kind of sudden surge in call option buying right before some big market-moving news drops, it can mean that some people knew what was coming.
Yeah. And Unusual Whales, they highlighted this one example that's pretty crazy. Someone opened a massive position in SPY 59 calls, and these calls were set to expire that same day.
Wow, that's a bold move.
It is. And get this, within just an hour of Trump's announcement, these calls had gone up in value by over 2,100%.
No way.
Yeah. And on top of that, there were also a lot of new positions being opened in short-term QQQ and TQQQ calls. And these calls had really high implied volatility.
Which means that the traders were expecting a huge price swing.
Exactly. And for that kind of volatility to spike right before the announcement, it definitely suggests that some people were making some very targeted bets on a quick market reversal.
Especially with those SPY calls expiring the same day. That's like they knew exactly what was going to happen.
Right.
It's not like they were just hoping for a general upward trend over time. This was like, I know this market's going to jump, and I know it's going to jump today.
Yeah.
It's a big risk. But obviously, it paid off huge for them.
But here's another interesting detail to add to all this. 2 days before, on April 7th, there was this report from Walter Bloomberg, and it said that Kevin Hassett, who is Trump's economic advisor, was saying that Trump was thinking about a 90-day tariff pause for every country except China.
So before the actual announcement.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the market initially went up on this news, but then it quickly fell back down.
Interesting. So do we think this was maybe a deliberate leak to see how the market would react before they made the official announcement?
It's a possibility. I mean, it's kind of like a trial balloon, right? Put the idea out there, see what happens, and then adjust your strategy accordingly.
It would make sense. If the administration saw that initial positive reaction, it could have given them more confidence to go ahead with the plan, or maybe it even helped them fine-tune the timing and the specifics of the announcement to get the biggest impact.
Yeah, I mean, commentators like CoffeeZilla and Spencer Hakimian, they're both talking about this idea, too, that maybe this April 7th report was a way to test the waters.
Which, if that's the case, it shows a pretty sophisticated understanding of how markets work.
Right.
And a willingness to, potentially manipulate them.
And speaking of manipulation, we also saw reports of people making some pretty extraordinary profits from all this.
Yeah, how much are we talking?
Well, one report said that someone bought $1.3 million worth of SPY, earlier on. And by the end of the day on April 9th, that investment was worth $33 million.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's a massive return.
It is. And it's all tied to this tariff news. So, it really raises the question, how do you make that kind of money unless you have some inside information?
Right. I mean, there's lucky and then there's suspiciously lucky.
Exactly. And that's why this whole situation has sparked a huge political backlash.
Yeah. I mean, it's not surprising.
I mean, you have people like Senator Adam Schiff and Congresswoman Elizabeth Warren. They've both come out and called for investigations into potential market manipulation and insider trading connected to all of this.
I mean, it definitely seems like there's something fishy going on.
Schiff, he specifically zeroed in on that. This is a great time to buy post that Trump made. And he was basically saying, who in the administration might have traded on this information before it was public?
Right, because this isn't the first time we've seen something like this, right? I mean, there have been questions about Trump and his associates being involved in cryptocurrency and meme coins before, and it seems like they might be using similar tactics here.
Yeah, and he also pointed out how this could really hurt ordinary people who are just trying to invest their savings or build up their retirement funds.
Right. If the market is being manipulated like this, it undermines the whole system.
Exactly. And Warren, she went even further. She basically came out and called what Trump did the whole buy post, followed by the tariff changes. She called it market manipulation and corruption.
Wow.
Yeah. And she's demanding an independent investigation to figure out if Trump or anyone in his administration was using this to help out their donors or benefit themselves at the expense of the public.
That's a serious accusation.
It is.
But honestly, given everything we've talked about, it's not hard to see why she's so concerned. This whole thing has the appearance of a coordinated effort to, move the market in a specific direction for personal gain.
Now, the Trump White House, they're pushing back on all of this. Scott Bessant and Caroline Leavitt, they've both come out and said that these tariff adjustments were all part of a deliberate strategy.
Oh.
Yeah, they're calling it, the art of the deal.
Right. Classic Trump.
They're saying that Trump was just using his strategic thinking to put pressure on China and strengthen relationships with our allies who didn't retaliate against those first tariffs.
So they're saying this was the plan all along.
That's what they're saying.
But if that's true, it means that American businesses and everyday people were basically left in the dark.
Right. They faced all this uncertainty and potentially lost money because the administration was deliberately misleading them about their intentions with these tariffs.
Yeah, and that's not to mention the potential damage to our relationships with those allies who are hit with tariffs, even though they have free trade agreements with us.
Exactly. And, Stephen Horsford, who's a Democratic congressman, he brought this up when he questioned Jamieson Greer, the trade representative, about the logic behind imposing tariffs on a country like Australia.
Australia.
Yeah, because we have a trade surplus with them. We have a free trade agreement with them. It didn't make any sense.
Especially since Greer was simultaneously telling Congress that the tariffs wouldn't be paused. It's completely contradictory.
It really is. So, I mean, with everything we've discussed, the market surge right after the announcement, the weird trading activity before it happened, the report about a potential pause that got walked back, the administration saying it was all part of a plan. What do you make of it?
Honestly, it's hard to shake the feeling that something's not right here.
Mm-hmm.
The timing, the trading patterns, the shifting explanations, it just doesn't add up.
Right. And the fact you have all these calls for investigation, it shows how seriously people are taking these allegations.
Mm.
This isn't just about some technicality in the stock market. It's about the integrity of our financial system and the trust that people have in our government.
Exactly. And it raises some really important questions about how much power the president should have to influence the market and how we can hold those in power accountable when things go wrong.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So for all of you listening, we really encourage you to keep digging into this story, look at the different perspectives, and form your own opinions. We'll be back with more deep dives soon, but for now, thanks for joining us on Le Podcast de Philippe. And if you're watching on YouTube, please help us hit that 1,000 subscriber mark today.
Every subscriber helps.
They do. We appreciate it.